Hello, good evening, and welcome to our last live stream for 2020. This is the December live stream, and we're going to be talking about the new developments for the wheel rotation node that our patrons have voted for this month. Um, so yeah, let's get right into it. So the wheel rotation node was a node that our patrons voted for 2 months ago, and it basically allows you to rotate a wheel according to the distance that it has traveled. And that's what it does. This is the user interface to it. And it all started when somebody asked if it would be possible to have the wheel align to the direction that it's traveling in. And I do have the user interface for that. So you will have a checkbox to align, and then you will have a look ahead value, which will be in seconds, which is going to be the target that the wheel will be looking at in the future to align the wheel to. Um, the axis that will be rotated depends on the forward direction that you select here anyhow. So there's no other control required to actually define how the alignment works. It's just those two things. So that's one thing that's going to be added this month. Another thing that people talked about was the fact that performance isn't quite where it should be. And the problem here is that essentially, if we go to a point in the future, like let's say 300 frames, if we go from frame 296 to let's say 297, what the node does is it basically gets the position of our reference item for the 298 frames before the current one and adds the positions up to compute the actual distance that the wheel has traveled, and that allows it to compute the rotation. If you go to jump to frame 298, it will do the same thing for the previous 297 frames. There is no caching involved whatsoever. And the reason why is something I'll go into a minute. So that's one of the main issues why it's slowing down. Also, if you have multiple wheels, then each one of them is going to jump back in time to compute the previous transformations, and that just doesn't just add up. It's a bit more than that, and it just causes the whole wheel thing to slow down. One way to get around that is, of course, to bake your motions, um, but that's something that needs to be done manually. So, yeah, why doesn't the wheel node cache the actual rotation or distance that it's traveled? Why does it always compute them from the start? One, well, there's two reasons. One is specific to the node, and the other one is specific to Lightwave. Essentially, if I were to cache the distance values, the values the distances that have been traveled, I would need to know if something that could modify that distance, like in this case, if the movement reference is being changed manually, um, then the whole cache needs to be invalidated and recomputed every time something that is affecting the travel distance changes. And so far, um, it doesn't actually know if anything affecting the travel distance changes, so I can't really compute a cache. Um, I'll need to check if I can see if an item has been transformed via the SDK. And if that is possible, then I could add a cache that is automatic. And if anything that affects the reference item or its parents, if anything changes, if anything's being edited by the user, then it just invalidates the cache and recomputes it, and that can be added to all the nodes. Um, However, I'm not quite sure if that is possible if the SDK gives me enough information about those items having been edited or changed, because that doesn't just involve things like the user just grabbing an item and repositioning it like this, but it also includes things like an expression that's driving the wheel being changed. So that makes the whole caching, automatic caching, very, very hard. Another option to speed things up would be to basically add a manual cache. So you would get an option further down here with a checkbox that says, use cache, and then a button that just allows you to recompute it. And in that way, once you activate the cache on a node, it would compute all the positions for the current render range. And if you actually want to update that because you've moved the reference item or because you've changed the render range, then you would need to essentially rebake the cache again, but manually. Press a button in the user interface. The most the easiest thing I could do for the workflow there is maybe add a master plugin that automatically updates the cache for all the wheel rotation nodes within the current scene. But that's essentially as far as I could automate a manual way of baking things. Also, talking about the node specifically, the node is applied via the nodal motion, which in turn opens a node editor. And that's where the wheel rotation node is located. Now, the issue with a node is that it's actually not, it doesn't know if it's applied to an item and which item it's been applied to. It only knows if it's being evaluated in the context of an item. So since the node could, for example, be used for shading as well, which means that the reference item you set here on the node is super crucial, because without this reference item, it doesn't actually know what it's being attached to or what it refers to. And only setting an item in there would also allow something like the baking to work. Now, two additions we have this month is that we're going to have the wheel rotation as a channel modifier, and that will also require you to pick a movement reference item, but also as a motion modifier, which is something that is going to end up directly in the list here. And the motion modifier actually has one distinct advantage, besides the fact that it's closer to the user because there's no need to go via the node editor. And that's the fact that it actually knows what it's being applied to. So if you will eventually be able to apply the wheel rotation just as a motion modifier, there won't be a reason to necessarily define a movement reference. So as you can see here, you have the none option. I'm going to replace that by a self option for the wheel rotation motion modifier. And that way it's going to always take its own position as the traveled reference for the look ahead and for the rotation. And that way you can also copy and paste it from one item to other items, and it's going to work there just as you pasted it. With the node, that's unfortunately not possible. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to talk about. But the main performance thing is going to be um, the caching and the improvements to the computations. And I don't see any other way to really speed them up besides actually adding a cache to the node, to the motion modifier, to the motion channel, and at least give them something like a combined way to control all of the nodes in the current scene, as opposed to you having to manually go to every nodal graph and to every motion modifier that uses the wheel rotation and manually refresh the cache in each one of them. There's at least going to be one button that will update all the caches for all the nodes and wheel rotations in your scene. Um, if I save out the cache with the settings of the node or the motion modifier, then you will also not need to actually bake them anymore, not even for rendering, but it would also increase your file size fairly dramatically because you're essentially embedding almost like a small MDT into your file. Um, but I think that's actually going to be a fairly decent thing to do, and it would make things a lot simpler. But then again, even if I don't save with the don't save the cache, it's probably going to be recomputed automatically once you load the scene into a fresh instance of layout or the network rendering node. So yeah, the changes this month will be, just to summarize, we'll be able to align the wheel to the direction it's traveling. There's going to be a nodal a wheel rotation motion modifier and a wheel rotation channel modifier in addition to the node. And there's going to be some kind of caching slash baking mechanism built in, um, which will be manual, but it will be manual in a way that you will be able to rebake everything with the press of one button, as opposed to doing it in every single user interface. And yeah, there is little else to show you guys actually. So if you have any questions, please hit me. I mean, we can't just make it a 15-minute stream today. That would be almost a waste of time. No, not really, but yeah, this is just going to be a performance thing. Also, one thing that somebody asked for on Discord was we do have the wheel radius here, and it would be nice to have a gizmo where you can actually edit or view the wheel radius and the viewport. Um, to do that, I would also need to know which item the plugin is attached to, which, as I explained earlier, isn't possible for the node, isn't possible for the channel modifier, but it will be possible for the wheel rotation motion modifier. So one thing I am very likely to do is that if I implement this as a motion modifier that shows up in the list here, it will also show you a circular gizmo around the current item that matches the wheel radius setting here. And I will also add a way to interactively change that, and also take the item that the wheel rotation is being to attach to and look at the bounding box and pre-compute that wheel radius setting here for the first time the plugin is being called. If you need the wheel to rotate backwards, that's a lot simpler because you have the rotation multiplier here. And that's actually something I did here, is that in this case, the rotation multiplier along the animation is animated from 100% to, what is it, to 0% to 500%. And I could even set this to, where is it? Let's make that minus 100% over here as well. This is going to be a bit slow because this is a debug build of the plugin. Actually, let's keep the envelope open. There we go. So it's rotating forward. Comes to a stop. That's because the rotation actually stops here as well. But yeah, you can basically just take the rotation multiplier and animate that and change that. Well, the problem isn't really the parent object, it's the current object, the object they're attached to. The node isn't really attached to an item. A node is only attached to a node editor, and the node editor could be attached anywhere. The same is true for a motion channel. I don't think you can get from the motion channel to the actual item that it's being attached to, because again, a motion channel could be attached to something like a node, for example. A procedural tile node. So basically, like a checkerboard, but with some spacing in between the checks if required. And then the question is if it actually has to be 6 specific colors, or if you would like to interpolate between a gradient or something like that. What should be offset? And of course, for a spherical one, why 6? Why not 8? Or why not 4? That's too, it's a bit too specific. So there's one already. Well, the problem with something like spherical is that at the poles you will have a problem. with the pattern not being rectangular anymore. And I suspect it will need to be a set of squares. No, don't worry. I'm pretty much done here. There's not much more to talk about. Um, I did answer Mike's question that yes, you have negative values here to multiply the rotation with, and that's all there is. Yeah, I could probably think about something that is similar to the where is it? Let's see if I can find that scene. That's similar to the random tile mapper node that I wrote. I can't, yeah, I can't find it here at the moment. But let's just take the triplanar cow. So essentially, the where's it? The random image mapper should be similar, except that you would basically also pipe in a projection into that node, and it would then use the UVs to create the tiles. No, I don't have IFW2. I also don't think that it's that whoever wrote it wants to actually sell it. So actually, oh no, that's just checkerboard 2D. To be fair, if the checkerboard 2D just had a projection input, that would already solve a lot of things in Lightwave. The same with bricks 2D and grid 2D on planks and whatever. Yeah, just having a projection input there would do the trick. This one, yeah, it is odd, and it should be able to output a bump because it does have a certain. Actually, no, we have the map. We have the mapping here, of course. So yeah, you can apply some spherical mapping here and then use it on a sphere. But yeah, the tile is interesting. I have to think about that. I'm wondering if there's actually an open shading language tile thing out there that could be used as a template. But then again, I suppose that the thing with the 6 colors is also going to be an issue, which is very specific. Now, wonder if it might actually make more sense, like in the where is it? The random image mapper. You have the tile value output. If for something like just a tile output, you also had a tile value which you could then use to drive a gradient or whatever, and then basically use the a procedural node to drive a gradient to get the actual color. Because then you could say, well, I need 6 colors in my case, but maybe you need 8 or maybe you need 10. Then it doesn't matter because the tile value will give you a value between 0 and 1, spread across all the tiles in a random fashion. That's all right. I still don't have anything else to talk about when it comes to the wheel rotation, so you haven't blown anything. And yeah, for those just watching the video, John asked about a procedural tile node for Lightwave 3D as something for a future Patreon request. And yeah, I'll have a look at that. But yeah, as far as the wheel rotation is concerned, well, the brick one already makes it a lot trickier. Because you probably don't only want square ones either. But when you think about bricks, all of a sudden you want rectangles in there. And then it's not as simple as it seems to be. All right, so yeah, those are the things to do for the wheel rotation. Since this is a bit of an odd month, since it's the last month and we have Christmas coming up and everything, even though we are very likely to be on maybe even a proper lockdown starting tomorrow, things have been, with all the holidays, things are a bit shuffled this month, but I'll try to get a build out by late next week or so. And then you should be able to play with that. And I'll also have to explore the whole caching and baking the rotations and the distances traveled a bit more. Yeah, I don't know how the random mapping of colors works in W2. I mean, I can think of a few ways how you could do it. But it depends on what drives what. I'm not sure if it, for example, allows for multiple textures as opposed to just single colors. But I guess it's kind of using its own system at that point and not using something that Lightwave provides natively via the normal node connections. All right. Well, if there's no more questions about the wheel rotation or about future plugins, then yeah, let's call it a night. I'd like to thank all of you for watching. For those of you that aren't patrons, this is going to be the last live stream for this month, so you'll see more for this year, so you'll see more next year. For all the patrons, we are going to have a Q&A stream either next week or the week after. Actually, maybe even one. I think we wanted to have one on the 23rd, which would be the day before Christmas Eve, just to break out from the usual Friday thing. And that's going to be a very private, patron-only Q&A stream. So yeah, you guys have a nice evening, nice weekend, nice breakfast, and we'll either see you later this month or next year. Thanks for your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't, and take care. Bye bye.